Welcome to the place where we learn about and learn from the leaders in our field who are powering creativity. I'm Aaron Dworkin, and this is Arts Engines. Thanks again for joining me here on Arts Engines. Today's guest is Jyoti Gupta, who serves as faculty fellow at the Curb Center and assistant professor of practice at the Peabody College of Education at Vanderbilt University. Jyoti, welcome to the show.
Aaron, thank you so much. It's a privilege to be here.
Well, so I am so excited to be able to talk to you. And the Curb Center is one of our wonderful creative partners. And I've had the opportunity to actually see the extraordinary work that all of you do up front, having been able to visit there. And so I thought I would kind of just open up to could you just share the, breadth of what work is done and the overall focus at the Curb Center?
Yeah, of course. Sure. So I'll say, and thank you for that introduction. I'm a little different from, I think, some of the guests that I'm probably the least artistically inclined of all the guests that you've had on Arts Engines, because I'm a assistant professor, as you said, in this Department of Human and Organizational Development. And so as a fellow with the Curb Center for Arts Enterprise and Public Policy, we've been working together for a couple of years now. And I know your listeners have heard about the Curb Center before, but it's the Curb Center. It's an interdisciplinary arts center that is really positioning art as a mode of inquiry. So really investigating critical questions and challenges in our world, and a mode for flourishing of the human spirit. So it's an amazing place and a lot of really diverse work going on there.
It's absolutely awesome. And the breadth of some of the work is really extraordinary. And so a key focus that you are specifically focusing on too is kind of the development of kind of a community of practice for leaders in Nashville, for the arts leaders in Nashville. And so this is fascinating work, and wondering if you could kind of describe the nature of that, because certainly it's something that others who are watching and in our audience might want to be thinking about, and how things relate to their own communities.
Yeah, I'm happy to share about this. So I was interested in partnering with the Curb Center because we really had the shared interest around how are artists and arts organizations both shaping and shaped by the development landscape of Nashville. And we are having sort of shared concerns too about the sustainability of the city's arts organizational infrastructure. So as Nashville has this international reputation, right, as Music City.
Right.
Sort of in 2023, which is when we first started kind of talking and collaborating, we were really hearing different narratives about what is happening, the health of the arts sector more broadly. A lot of sort of longtime organizational leaders stepping down or transitioning, heated public debates about public funding or funding mechanisms, sort of historically, but also in the contemporary moment. Continuing effects of COVID on the arts sector, and really, sort of alarmingly, some evidence from surveys that artists, a large proportion of artists, were planning to move out of Nashville in the next 3 years. And so we really began thinking together and talking together about, how can we steward kind of a community of arts leaders who want to engage not just in conversation together about the state of Nashville's arts sector. So not only commiserate in sort of this shared struggle, but also really want to engage in inquiry and learning together about it. So in 2023, we started we're calling the Arts and Urban Futures Community of Practice. And so we describe it as a convening space that is supporting artists and arts organization leaders in identifying needs and gaps, investigating critical questions, and through sort of learning and through this relationship development, really building towards their collective desires for an equitable, a just, and a thriving arts infrastructure. So we've really been seeing our role as conveners of this community of practice, rather than as like directors of a program.
Right. And that's what I was wondering ultimately, right? And I'm sure there are some in our audience who are like, okay, that sounds awesome. And that would be great in our community for our arts leaders to come together. Um, uh, in terms of in practice, right? In the actual practice of it, what does that look like, right? What does either a session look like or the framework of it? And is kind of your primary role facilitation, or are there key things and ways that you're able to act as a catalyst for that conversation? Kind of curious to help our audience understand what's happening in the room.
Absolutely. Yeah. And so I appreciate this because I think we've tried to be very intentional about how to create an effective learning space. And so there's always food, you know.
Critically important. And in Nashville,
important.
Phenomenal food.
Yes, so. Exactly. But we've been meeting together for 2 years. And so in the first year, we meet about 2 to 3, we're on this academic calendar. So 2 to 3 times a semester, about 6 times a year. And they're all slightly different formats, some structured conversation around readings. So we pull in sort of not necessarily academic readings, but sort of very accessible readings about arts infrastructures and arts ecosystems in different cities, about some of the struggles in different cities and how they relate to people's lived experiences in Nashville. We've had people, local leaders who have sort of historic knowledge about how Nashville's arts ecosystem came to be, some of the political dynamics that are going on. But across all the formats, we really invite participants to keep 2 questions kind of going in their minds. One is, what does a thriving arts ecosystem in Nashville look like? And the other is, what is a resilient arts organization? And so like across this time, we've really, so that I would say that first year, we sort of spent a lot of time trying to listen, gain a sense of what are people curious about? What are people experiencing in their organizations? And then in the second year, we really have tried to design more structured learning opportunities. So based on a concern that we were hearing about limited opportunities for artists and arts organizations to really develop and have feedback mechanisms, we've hosted a series of workshops around program evaluation, the critical response process developed by Liz Lerman, a talk with a local arts critic about sort of Nashville's mechanisms for public critique and feedback. And so we've tried to kind of provide both these kind of more like workshop didactic experiences, but really ground them in, well, what are the things that arts leaders have really expressed concern and curiosity about?
Well, it's fascinating work. And of course, I would be remiss, and so many arts leaders are talking about what's happening in the broader society right now, and wondering has that do the both national as well as even regional or local political landscapes or social landscapes, do you find that entering the conversation, and if so, how and what does that look like?
Yeah, it's such a good question, Erin. I think because we don't shy away from topics. I think we really try to take this approach of curiosity and inquiry, like what do we need to understand here about the changing context, and how can we really ground that in what are people's lived experiences as artists, individual artists, but also within their organizations. So we really, rather, I think, than kind of get caught in sort of a cycle of despair, I think we've really tried to stay grounded in, okay, who are we? Like, let us be in relationship with one another. we have to manage and sort of the deal with the context that we have right here before us, you know. So we really have attracted leaders from all different types of organizations, and it's been an indicator that, you know, the challenges, the opportunities are really felt by a range of people. And there's a real commitment across the people who we've had participate to approach arts organizations as learning contexts. There's like a real hunger for learning, for incorporating understandings into people's organizations. And for that practice of learning and inquiry to be collective. So not just, you know, let me go read something and try to apply it, but let us talk about this together. So let our learning be collective and constant, really.
Awesome, awesome. Well, it is obviously phenomenal work and really not only informing, inspiring, but also literally building even further community across a broad cross section of Nashville's leaders. So unfortunately, we are just about out of time, but I always like to ask of all of my guests, right, this work, which must be so rewarding and especially gathering people, and of course, with some good Nashville food, that there must be some tough days, right? Or times when it seems like maybe there's an obstacle that is insurmountable. Just wondering, as a leader, as an academic leader, as a leader in the creative ecosystem, any mechanisms or methods that you have for yourself to kind of get through those tougher times?
Yeah, this is such a nice question, Aaron. You know, I'd say my practices are really around countering a sense of isolation, sort of that feeling that we're alone in tough moments. And so I think one thing that supports that is just continuing to be curious about other people. You know, like everybody has a story. And when you make space to really listen to it, you can just discover amazing things about humanity. So I think keeping in mind, you know, am I really curious about people, or have I already made up my mind? You know, and I think the other, and it might sound mundane, I guess, but having a critical friend. So, you know, we can live in our heads far too much. It can be isolating, especially in tough times. But really having someone who can challenge us with love, can help us see through another lens, kind of give us feedback. You know, we might not always want the challenge. We're challenged by so many things, but I think, you know, where we are open to challenge, it can also like open up understanding, and that can be a huge relief, and it can also give us a path forward. So
Jyoti Gupta, you truly are one of the arts engines who is powering human creativity in our world. Thank you so much for everything that you are doing, not just in Nashville, but for our field as a whole. And thank you so much for being on the show.
thank you so much, Aaron.